The hum of the luxury sedan's engine was a low, steady thrum beneath my fingertips, a deep vibration that resonated through the plush leather seat and up my spine. Outside, the world was a blur of late afternoon greens and golds, the setting sun painting streaks of apricot and rose across the vast expanse of sky. We were deep in the countryside, far from the city's frantic pulse, heading towards a place that felt both impossibly grand and strangely suffocating in my imagination. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of old money and polished wood seemed to cling to Liam, even in the car, a subtle musk that was both comforting and utterly alien to my own lived experiences. He smelled of expensive cologne and a faint, sweet aftershave, a scent I had come to associate with safety and a future I was actively, meticulously crafting. Liam, my fiancé, sat beside me, his large, warm hand resting on my knee, occasionally giving it a reassuring squeeze. His profile was relaxed, a gentle smile playing on his lips as he navigated the winding country lanes. He was handsome in that effortless, classic way, dark hair perpetually falling into his eyes, a strong jawline, and eyes the color of warm honey. He was everything my younger self could only have dreamed of, and everything my current self intended to leverage. He loved me, genuinely, uncomplicatedly. He saw the best in me, a pure, innocent version of me that I had carefully constructed for him, brick by painstaking brick. His genuine affection was, perhaps, the most valuable tool in my arsenal. "Almost there, my love," he murmured, his voice a soft baritone that always managed to soothe the frantic buzzing in my mind. "Just a few more minutes." I turned to him, my expression carefully calibrated, a wide, slightly nervous smile that held just the right amount of awe and a flutter of trepidation. My eyes, I knew, were wide and a little too bright, a trick I'd perfected in front of countless mirrors. "Oh, Liam, I really am. A little nervous, of course. Your family, they sound so wonderful." My voice was soft, lilting, with a hint of an upward inflection at the end, making it sound more like a question than a statement, a subtle plea for acceptance. It was the voice I reserved for moments when I needed to appear utterly harmless, utterly without guile. He chuckled, a rich, full sound that filled the small space of the car. "Darling, they're going to adore you. How could they not?" He squeezed my knee again, his thumb brushing over the delicate fabric of my modest dress. It was the kind of dress that blended in, that suggested a sweet, unassuming nature. My hair was pulled back in a loose, slightly messy bun, framing my face in a way that made me look younger, softer. Minimal makeup, just enough to enhance my features without drawing attention. Every detail was deliberate, every choice a calculated move in a game I intended to win. My heart, however, was a frantic drum against my ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. Not from nervousness, not truly. It was the thrill of the hunt, the adrenaline of the performance. I had spent weeks, months even, meticulously researching the Blackwood family, their history, their businesses, their social circles, their eccentricities, their vulnerabilities. I knew Eleanor Blackwood, Liam's mother, was a formidable woman, a society doyenne with an iron will disguised by a veneer of old-world charm. She valued tradition, lineage, and above all, appearances. She would be scrutinizing me, assessing my suitability, my worthiness to enter her rarefied world. And I intended to give her exactly what she expected, and then some. I would be the blank canvas upon which she could project her ideal daughter-in-law, a sweet, unthreatening creature who would never challenge her authority, never question her judgment. A gullible girl, easily molded. A humble girl, grateful for their acceptance. We rounded a final bend, and then, through a clearing of ancient oaks, it appeared. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just a house, it was an estate. A sprawling, magnificent edifice of gray stone and dark timber, ivy clinging gracefully to its walls, rising majestically against the backdrop of the deepening twilight. Ornate wrought iron gates, flanked by stone pillars carved with the Blackwood crest, stood open, inviting us into a world that felt centuries old. A gasp, genuine this time, escaped my lips. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking. "Oh, Liam," I whispered, my voice thick with feigned wonder. I let my eyes widen, taking in the manicured lawns, the distant glimmer of a fountain, the sheer, undeniable opulence. I wanted them to see my amazement, my perceived unfamiliarity with such grandeur. I wanted them to think I was utterly unsophisticated, easily impressed. He beamed, clearly pleased by my reaction. It's been in the family for generations. As we drove up the long gravel driveway, the crunch of the tires was the only sound breaking the serene silence. The air here was different too, crisp and clean, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and ancient trees, mingled with the sweet, delicate perfume of blooming night jasmine from unseen gardens. A wave of calm washed over me, a strange peace that settled deep in my bones. This was it. The stage was set. The car glided to a stop in front of the massive oak front doors, which were already opening. A tall, impeccably dressed woman with a severe bun and a crisp black apron stood framed in the doorway, a polite, unsmiling expression on her face. The housekeeper, no doubt. She was the first gatekeeper. "Ah, Mrs. Jenkins," Liam said, his voice warm and familiar. "Mr. Liam," she replied, her voice clipped and professional. Her eyes flickered to me, a quick, assessing glance that missed nothing. I offered her a small, shy smile, dipping my head slightly in a gesture of deference. She gave the barest hint of a nod in return before stepping aside. And then she was there, Eleanor Blackwood. She emerged from the shadowy depths of the grand foyer, a vision in a tailored silk dress the color of amethyst. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant chignon, her pearl earrings gleaming softly in the ambient light. Her eyes, the same warm honey as Liam's, but sharper, colder, settled on me. They were analytical, dissecting, peeling back layers. I met her gaze with an open, innocent one, a slight tremor in my lower lip. "Liam!" she exclaimed, her voice melodious and refined, stretching out her arms for an embrace. He met her halfway, a genuine warmth radiating from him. After a moment, she released him and turned her full attention to me. "And you must be Clara," she said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming softer, though the sharpness in her eyes remained. She extended a perfectly manicured hand, adorned with a magnificent diamond ring that seemed to wink mockingly at me. I took it gently, making sure my grip was soft, almost hesitant, not too firm, not too weak. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood." My voice was a breathy whisper, laced with a deference that bordered on awe. I kept my head slightly bowed, my gaze lowered just enough to appear demure, but still allowing me to observe her reactions through my lashes. I noticed the way her gaze lingered on my simple dress, on my unadorned hands, a faint, almost imperceptible curl of her lip. Judgment. Good. She was already forming her opinion. "Please call me Eleanor, dear," she corrected, though her tone suggested it was more of a command than an invitation. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor." There was an emphasis on Liam's fiancé, a subtle reminder of my status, or lack thereof, within their family. Just then, another figure appeared, emerging from a dimly lit sitting room to Liam's left. A man, tall and imposing, with distinguished gray hair and a stern expression. Richard Blackwood, Liam's father. His presence filled the space, exuding an aura of quiet authority. "Father," Liam greeted, moving to shake his hand. Richard nodded, his eyes, dark and penetrating, briefly sweeping over me before returning to Liam. "Son, good to see you." His voice was deep, resonant, a rumble of power. "And this is Clara," Liam said, pulling me gently forward, a proud smile on his face. I curtsied, a slightly old-fashioned gesture I had practiced to perfection, designed to convey respect and a touch of almost childlike innocence. "It's an honor to meet you, mister." I kept my eyes on the floor for a moment longer than strictly necessary, then lifted them slowly, offering him a shy, hopeful smile. He simply nodded again, his expression unreadable. No warmth, no overt disapproval, just assessment. Come in," Eleanor chirped, a hostess already in full swing. "Don't just stand in the doorway. Mrs. Jenkins will see to your bags. Liam, perhaps you could show Clara up to the guest suite." "Of course, Mother," Liam replied, taking my hand. His fingers felt warm and reassuring around mine. "Come on, Clara." As we walked through the grand foyer, my senses were overwhelmed. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax polish, ancient leather, and something vaguely floral, like dried potpourri. My shoes, simple ballet flats, made barely a sound on the intricate Persian rug that covered the polished marble floor. Every surface gleamed, every object bespoke wealth and history. Massive oil paintings and gilded frames adorned the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow my every move. The silence in the house was profound, broken only by the soft rustle of Eleanor's silk dress as she moved towards a distant room, her voice fading as she spoke to someone I couldn't yet see. I let my gaze wander, my head tilted slightly, as if trying to absorb every detail. "It's just so grand," I breathed, my voice barely audible. I wanted them to believe I was a small town girl, easily overwhelmed, a fresh canvas. Liam smiled, squeezing my hand. "It's home." He clearly didn't realize that I wasn't trying to get used to it. I was trying to understand it, to dissect its power dynamics, to find its weaknesses. We ascended a magnificent sweeping staircase, its banister polished to a mirror sheen. The wood smelled faintly of lemon and old varnish. Each step creaked just a little under our combined weight, a tiny sigh from the ancient house. On the landing, a full-length portrait of a stern-looking man in period attire stared down at us. "That's my great-great-grandfather," Liam explained, following my gaze. I tilted my head, studying the painting, my brow furrowed in a show of earnest curiosity. "He looks very serious." My comment was carefully neutral, a surface observation. He led me down a long, quiet corridor on the second floor, past closed doors that hinted at untold secrets and histories. The silence here was even deeper, broken only by the distant, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere below. Finally, he stopped at a heavy oak door. "This is your room," he announced, pushing it open. "It's the East Wing guest suite." I stepped inside and my breath caught, not in feigned wonder this time, but in genuine surprise. The room was enormous, exquisitely furnished with antique pieces, a 4-poster bed draped in rich fabrics, and a bay window overlooking a manicured garden that stretched out towards the distant woods. A faint, sweet scent of lavender and fresh linen filled the air, a delicate counterpoint to the heavier aromas downstairs. A small, intricately carved writing desk sat beneath the window, a fresh bouquet of white roses in a crystal vase on its surface. "Oh, Liam," I whispered, turning to him, my eyes wide and shimmering with what I hoped looked like unshed tears of gratitude. It's beautiful." The self-deprecating tone was essential. It reinforced the narrative. He chuckled, pulling me into a gentle hug. "Nonsense, darling. You deserve nothing but the best. Make yourself comfortable. I'll be back to collect you for dinner in about 45 minutes. Chloe. The final piece of the puzzle. Liam's younger sister, rumored to be even more discerning and perhaps less forgiving than her mother. The challenge was building. I hugged him back, burying my face briefly in his shoulder, inhaling his comforting scent. "Thank you, Liam." I pulled back, offering him a soft, grateful smile. He kissed my forehead, a tender, loving gesture. "You don't need to try, my love." He had no idea. As the door clicked shut behind him, the silence in the room became absolute, profound. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the fading echo of his footsteps down the corridor, until there was nothing but the quiet hum of the house. The carefully constructed smile slowly slid from my face, replaced by a cool, analytical expression. My shoulders, which had been subtly hunched to convey a slight diffidence, straightened. My jaw, which had been relaxed and soft, tightened almost imperceptibly. I walked over to the bay window, pushing aside the heavy velvet curtains. The sun had almost fully set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the vast lawn. The air outside was growing chilly, and I could hear the faint, melancholic hoot of an owl from the distant woods. This was their kingdom, and I was here, not as a humble subject, but as a strategic player, poised to understand its every nuance. They saw a meek, easily impressed girl. They saw a blank slate. They would never see the sharp, calculating mind beneath the veneer, the one that had already cataloged the details of Eleanor's ring, Richard's watch, the subtle shift in Mrs. Jenkins's gaze. They would never suspect the years I had spent honing this persona, perfecting every gesture, every inflection. I ran a finger over the smooth, cool surface of the antique desk, then reached for one of the white roses, inhaling its delicate fragrance. It was a beautiful, innocent blossom, but even the most beautiful roses had thorns, and I was ready to show them mine when the time was right. Part 1.
The introduction, the underestimation. The problem was established, their perception of me, and my secret, carefully guarded intent. The game had just begun. The delicate fragrance of the white rose, a faint echo of innocence and purity, lingered on my fingertips. I drew my hand back, the cool, smooth petals a memory against my skin, and let my gaze sweep once more across the expansive drawing room. The shadows had deepened, swallowing the intricate patterns of the Persian rug and making the ornate furniture appear even more imposing. A sense of hushed expectation hung in the air, thick and palpable, like the heavy velvet drapes I had just pushed aside.
The only sound was the distant, almost imperceptible tick of a grandfather clock from somewhere deeper within the house, a rhythmic pulse measuring the slow approach of my new reality. A soft cough, a distinctly human sound that sliced through the room's grand silence, broke my reverie. I turned, my posture subtly shifting back into its carefully crafted deferential curve, my eyes widening just a fraction. Mrs. Jenkins stood framed in the doorway, a tall, slender woman whose silver hair was pulled back into a severe bun, her gray uniform perfectly pressed, a faint scent of lavender and starch preceding her. Her expression, though neutral, held an unspoken authority, a quiet competence honed over years of managing this sprawling estate. "Oh yes, Mrs. Jenkins," I replied, my tone soft, a touch breathless, as if still overwhelmed by the grandeur. I offered a small, hesitant smile. "The house is simply breathtaking." My gaze drifted around the room again, designed to convey genuine awe. Internally, I noted the subtle flicker in Mrs. Jenkins' eyes, a hint of pride, perhaps, or simply the ingrained habit of accepting compliments on behalf of the family she served. It was a useful data point. She identified strongly with the estate. "Indeed," she acknowledged, a flicker of something almost akin to satisfaction crossing her lips before vanishing. "Mr. and Mrs. Thorne will be joining you for dinner shortly. I thought you might wish to freshen up beforehand." She gestured faintly down the hallway, her hand movements economical, precise. "That would be lovely, thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I gave another small, polite nod, the very picture of a grateful guest. I followed her, my footsteps light on the polished oak floorboards, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The hallway stretched long and wide, lined with dark oil-painted portraits whose eyes seemed to follow us, the faces of generations of Thornes gazing out with an almost unsettling stillness. The air here was cooler, carrying the faint, earthy scent of old wood and beeswax polish, mingled with the lingering aroma of the rose from the drawing room. Each step was a deliberate act, my senses absorbing every detail, the faint creak of a distant floorboard, the almost imperceptible hum of the house settling into evening, the way the dim light from the wall sconces glinted off the intricate frames of the paintings. Mrs. Jenkins led me up a grand, sweeping staircase, its banister smooth and cool beneath my fingertips. The silence of the upper floor was even more profound, broken only by the soft rustle of Mrs. Jenkins's uniform and the almost inaudible padding of our shoes on the thick runner. She stopped before a heavy oak door, intricately carved with a floral motif. "This will be your room, Miss Albright," she announced, pushing the door inward with a gentle hand. "Dinner will be served in an hour." "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins," I said, my gratitude a carefully modulated note in my voice. As the door clicked shut behind me, the last whisper of her presence faded. I stood for a moment, letting the silence of the room envelop me. The cool air, tinged with the faint, pleasant scent of old linen and a whisper of something floral, settled around me. I took a slow, deep breath, allowing the carefully constructed tension in my shoulders to ease just a fraction. This was my sanctuary, however temporary. My gaze swept across the room. It was spacious, decorated in soft blues and creams, a stark contrast to the darker, more formal downstairs. A large four-poster bed, draped in sheer fabric, dominated one wall. A mahogany dresser, polished to a high sheen, stood opposite, topped with a silver-backed brush and mirror. A window, framed by light velvet curtains, overlooked the back gardens, now cloaked in the deep purple hues of twilight. I walked to the window, pushing aside the curtains. The vast lawn, which had seemed so imposing from downstairs, now appeared serene, stretching out towards a line of ancient trees that blurred into the deepening gloom. The melancholic hoot of the owl, clearer now, drifted from the distant woods, a primal call in the encroaching darkness. "Their kingdom,"
I reminded myself, the thought a sharp, cold edge in my mind. I scanned the garden, not for beauty, but for patterns. The placement of the garden lights, the winding paths, the faint glimmer of a water feature in the distance. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle, a potential route, a hidden corner. I noted the discreet security cameras, almost invisible against the dark stone of the manor, their red indicator lights blinking faintly. They were careful. That made the game all the more interesting. I turned from the window, my analytical gaze now sweeping the room's interior. I opened the wardrobe, a small selection of hangers, empty but waiting. A subtle scent of cedarwood, mixed with the faint, sweet smell of a sachet, permeated the space. I ran a hand over the smooth, cool surface of the mahogany dresser, then picked up the silver brush. It was heavy, finely crafted, a small testament to the understated luxury that permeated this household. I placed it back down with a soft click. My small travel bag sat neatly on a luggage rack near the door. I unzipped it, the quiet hiss of the zipper a stark sound in the profound silence. Inside, my carefully chosen attire waited. For tonight, a simple, elegant navy dress. It was modest, flattering, and above all, forgettable. It would allow me to blend, to observe, without drawing undue attention. I slipped it on, the cool silk a pleasant sensation against my skin. It flowed gracefully, accentuating my figure just enough to be feminine, but not so much as to be overtly provocative. It was the perfect garment for a meek, easily impressed girl. I moved to the mirror, my reflection a calm, composed figure.
I brushed my hair, allowing it to fall in soft waves around my shoulders, a touch of gentle innocence, a light dusting of powder, a faint trace of rose-scented perfume, a subtle lip tint. Nothing too bold, nothing that screamed for attention. I wanted to be a canvas upon which they would project their own assumptions. My internal clock, honed by years of disciplined self-control, informed me that a few minutes remained before dinner. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress yielding softly beneath me. My mind, however, remained sharp, poised. I reviewed my observations. Eleanor's ring, a substantial sapphire, an heirloom, likely. Richard's watch, a Patek Philippe, understandable but undeniably expensive, a mark of old money. Mrs. Jenkins's gaze, watchful, protective. And the house itself, a fortress of old wealth and secrets. The goal for the evening was simple: observe, listen, and establish my persona more deeply. I needed to let them talk, to let them reveal themselves, while I offered just enough of myself to seem agreeable, harmless. I would ask polite, perhaps slightly naive questions, designed to elicit information without seeming intrusive. I would smile at the right moments, nod appropriately, and convey an air of quiet fascination. A soft chime, distant but clear, drifted up from downstairs. Dinner. The sound, a delicate peal of crystal, was a summons. I rose, smoothing the fabric of my dress, my movements fluid and unhurried. The game was indeed still in its nascent stages, but the first pieces were already being moved. As I reached for the doorknob, I could already feel the slight tightening of my jaw, the almost imperceptible straightening of my shoulders. The meek girl was ready for her performance. The calculating mind was ready to watch. I opened the door, stepping out into the hushed corridor. The air was still, silent save for the faint, alluring aroma of roasting meat and herbs that now wafted upwards from downstairs. It was a promise of sustenance, but also a lure into the heart of the kingdom. I descended the grand staircase, my hand lightly gliding on the cool banister, each step measured, deliberate. My eyes, however, were not on my feet, but scanning the entrance to the dining room, anticipating the scene that awaited me. I could hear the murmur of voices now, low and indistinct, punctuated by the faint clinking of cutlery. The thorns were already there. My audience awaited. Years later, the soft chime still drifted up from downstairs, a delicate peal of crystal, but now it was a summons for me alone. I sat at the head of the vast dining table, the same polished mahogany expanse where the thorns had once held court. The room, once vibrant with their manufactured benami, now hummed with a quiet, almost reverent stillness that was entirely my own making.
Sunlight, filtered through the heavy silk drapes I had chosen, cast long golden streaks across the ancestral portraits that now felt less like their watchful ancestors and more like my silent witnesses. My teacup, a delicate porcelain piece from a collection I had inherited, or rather acquired, sat before me, a wisp of steam curling upwards. I took a slow sip, the Earl Grey comforting and familiar on my tongue. The aroma of roasting meat and herbs was still present, a testament to the household staff who now operated under my precise directives. It was a promise of sustenance, yes, but more significantly, it was the scent of a kingdom utterly conquered. A faint shuffle from the doorway drew my attention. Thomas Thorne, a shadow of the man he once was, stood hesitantly on the threshold. His shoulders, once so broad and confident, were stooped, his eyes sunken and devoid of their former spark. Beside him, Eleanor, her once vibrant dresses now faded and ill-fitting, clutched a worn shawl, her gaze fixed on the floor. They looked like specters haunting their own former domain. "Forgive our tardiness, ma'am," Thomas murmured, his voice a hoarse whisper, a stark contrast to the booming pronouncements I had once endured. I lowered my teacup, placing it gently in its saucer. The slight clinking sound seemed to echo in the silence. I allowed a moment to pass, letting the weight of their dependence settle upon them. The meek girl was long gone, shed like a discarded skin. The calculating mind, however, was in full, serene bloom. "It's quite all right, Thomas," I said, my voice even, devoid of any warmth or malice, simply stating a fact. "Do take your seats." I gestured to the two chairs at the very end of the table, far removed from my position of authority, chairs that had once been reserved for distant cousins or lesser acquaintances. They shuffled towards them, each movement a testament to their broken spirit. Eleanor glanced up once, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw a flicker of something undefinable. Resignation, perhaps, a ghost of the resentment she no longer dared to voice. I met her gaze with a placid, unreadable expression, the very same quiet fascination I had once feigned, now honed into a weapon of absolute control. I had watched them talk, watched them reveal themselves, and in doing so, they had hand-indeed keys to their entire existence. Their secrets, their vulnerabilities, their misplaced trust, all had been woven into the elaborate tapestry of their downfall. The game was not merely in its nascent stages then, it had been played to its meticulous, devastating conclusion. Their estate, their businesses, their very reputations had been systematically dismantled, transferred, and absorbed into my burgeoning empire. They were now merely tenants in a small annex of what was once their magnificent home, their livelihood entirely dependent on the meager stipend I graciously provided.
A servant entered, silent as a whisper, carrying a silver tureen. I watched as he placed it before me, a silent acknowledgement of who truly commanded this household. "Eleanor," I said, my voice cutting through the soft clinking of the soup ladle as the servant began to serve. "Did you remember to send the revised ledgers for the North Farm to Mr. Davies this morning?" Eleanor flinched, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh, yes, ma'am. I believe I did." "Excellent," I replied, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. It was not a smile of amusement, but of absolute triumph. My shoulders were perfectly straight, my jaw relaxed, no longer needing to feign meekness. I picked up my soup spoon, the silver gleaming under the chandelier. The faint clinking of cutlery from the other end of the table was now hesitant, almost apologetic. My audience was still here, forever bound to my performance, but now they were merely props in the grand, silent theater of my victory. The kingdom was mine.